Have you ever seen either the movie Leap Year or P.S. I Love You? One thing that both of those movies have in common is that there's parts of the movie or the entire movie that takes place in Ireland. And I want to tell you a story about Ireland. Once upon a time, I was very, very sad. Very, 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 very sad. And I was working at a job where I felt unappreciated and antagonized daily. The place that I worked didn't have grounds to fire me, so instead they just made things very difficult and bullied me until I felt like I was gonna quit, but I'm not a quitter. On the bright side, I'd saved up a little bit of money, and I thought to myself, what can I do to cheer myself up? What can I do so that I'm not constantly thinking about kissing the morning train? True story. And so then I thought, you know what? I'm going to go to a travel agent and I'm going to just figure something out. Maybe I'll spend a week on the beach or something. So I go to this travel agent and her name was Debbie and she was lovely. She's retired now, but she is like the best human being I've ever met in my entire life. And yes, she's Irish. So anyway, I walk into this travel agency and I see Debbie, and Debbie is having her Tim Hortons double coffee in the middle of the damn day. And I walk in and I say hi, and she says hi. And then she says, have a seat, and I have a seat. And then she said, what can I help you with? And I said, I almost started crying. I said, oh, I really need to get away because I don't have a will to live right now, and I saved up a little bit of money, and I just really, really need to get away. And this is my budget, and if you could find me someplace to go where they speak English and they're nice, and for this many days and for this much, that would be great. And then she said, okay. And she said, are you open to anywhere in the world? And I said, anywhere they speak English. Anywhere they speak English and they're going to be friendly to tourists. And she said, okay, can you give me the day and I'm going to give you a call back? I said, sure. I went home, didn't think anything about it. 2 days later, guess who calls me? Debbie. Debbie calls me and says, hi, I am 2 seconds away from confirming something, a trip for you. I just wanted to confirm that can I just go ahead with this and do you want the details? I said, no, I don't want the details. Just book it. It's fine. And then I said, is it within my budget? She said, yes. I said, is it available during the days that I need to? She goes, yes. I said, okay, just book it. Book it and call me right back. She said, okay. So she booked it and then she sent me an email, the itinerary. And then she said, okay. She said, I know this is going to be a little bit biased, but I'm Irish. And I think if you have a little bit of the holiday blues or you have the blues, I think you should go to Ireland and recharge your battery in Ireland. And I looked at this lady with red hair and I said, what the am I going to do in Ireland for a week? And she said, just go. You're going to have the best time. I booked you a hotel in a great spot. I booked you a couple excursions. You're going to have a great time. And I said, bitch, are you serious? And she said, yes. I said, okay. Anyway, before I know it, I am on an Aer Lingus flight to Ireland, Dublin. So I get to Dublin, and one thing that I do anytime that I travel is I find a church, okay? Anytime I solo travel, I find a church, and I go to the church, and I always pray that everything's gonna be okay, safe travels, nothing gets lost, and I'm not harmed. I always find a church. Every country I go to, I find a church, and the first thing I do is pray, okay? So anyway, I get to Dublin and it's dreary and it was gray and it was depressing, but everyone was so sweet and smiley, especially when they heard my accent. They were so nice. So I'm walking around and I'm like, okay, I'm going to put down my stuff at my hostel and then I'm going to find a church and I'm going to go pray and, see if I can pray away my feelings and just pray for a good trip. So I see a church and I wish I could remember what the church was called. It was so beautiful. I still have pictures on my phone. I might include a couple. So anyway, I'm sitting outside of this church and I'm contemplating, do I go in? Do I not go in? Do I wait? What do I do? And then this older gentleman, this older Irish guy is having his cigarette, okay? He's just... And I'm sitting on the steps of this church just like contemplating my life, and I just got really sad for some reason, okay? And then the gravity of my decision just hit me. Like I'm in Ireland by myself and it's raining and I'm sad, and now I'm even sadder because the weather is sad. So this old Irish guy sits beside me and he goes, how's it going? And I looked at him and I said, it could be better. He said, oh, you're having a rough go, are ya? I said, yeah, I think so. And then he said, oh, are you American? I said, no, I'm not American. I'm Canadian. And he said, oh, how long are you here? Welcome to Ireland. And I said, I'm not here for very long. Then he said, oh, all right. Are you going into the church? And I said, I think so. And then I said, I don't know. I feel weird. And he said, what's troubling you? What's troubling you, love? And I said, well, I don't know. I'm just kind of sad. And then he said, you've come all the way to Ireland and you're still sad. And I said, yeah. And then he said, can I give you advice? And I said, sure. And then he said, you have to make the most of every day. And I said, okay. And then he said, because yesterday's gone and tomorrow's not promised. All you have is today, and today's a gift. So make the most of every day. And then in that moment, I literally almost cried. So anyway, I'm outside this church and this man is giving me this advice and he's so nice. And then he goes, how about we go inside the church together and then we can do a prayer. And then when we leave, I could show you like a couple good spots. And I'm sure like everyone who's watching this video is like, girl, that's so dangerous. But I wasn't getting dangerous vibes from him. He just was like, he was like a grandfather. He was like, I was bigger than him. And I was like, he's not going to hurt me. He's fine. He also showed me a picture of his granddaughter. And he said, I'll introduce you to my granddaughter. And I said, okay. So like, he was fine. So we go inside this church. And he's like rolling his eyes. He goes, oh, you tourists all want to come to the church, but none of you are actually Christian. And I said, I'm Christian. So I went inside this church. And then before we left, I remember he actually gave me a rosary. He bought a rosary from that church, and I still have the rosary. And whenever I'm sad, I keep it in my pocket, even though I'm not Catholic. So anyway, he gets me this rosary, and we leave this church. And everything's all chill. And he goes, you want to go to the bar? And I'm like, dog, we just left church. And he goes, yeah, but it's the middle of the day. Let's go for a drink. And he goes, I'm going to invite my granddaughter. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So we go to this bar and then we're drinking. And then he invites his granddaughter. And his granddaughter is like maybe like a couple years younger than me. And she was so sweet. And then she said, oh, this is the best. Like, this is my favorite grandfather. He's the best ever, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, I'm safe. I'm not going to be hurt. I'm safe. So anyway, this man just restored my faith in humanity, and he just like warmed my heart and just made me feel so happy, and he was so sweet. And then later that night, me, him, and his granddaughter went out to another bar and we continued drinking. And I need to say this, Guinness is absolutely disgusting. And I don't like Guinness and I don't even drink that much. But just to avoid Guinness, I was shooting back Jameson. And I can't drink much. So anyway, the Jameson was hitting. So we're outside this bar taking a breather. And then there is these group of guys just like standing around, and I got nervous. And then here comes Grandpa. He comes out and he goes, you might want to film this. This is Irish folk music. You're going to love this. I'm going to include the clip. And basically these old dudes are out, these old Irish guys are outside this bar in Dublin, and they're singing about how their wife, and they are pleading to the judge to let them free. And it was so unsettling.
He was dead for sure, so I lifted up the manhole lid and I stuffed them down the sewer. Now when the Machi heard of this, she made me life a hell, and all for the sake of peace and quiet. I done whoring as well, and now I'm up before the judge to answer for me crime. Well, I didn't mind the first one, son, but not the second time.
Anyway, that was the best trip that I've ever taken, and to this day, every couple years or whenever I can, whenever I have like a vacation time or whenever I'm able, I go to Dublin. I go to Dublin, I go to Ireland. Nothing just makes my heart more happy than Ireland. Oh, Jamaica. Jamaica makes me really happy because the people are great. This is your sign that if you're ever sad and you're ever just going through some stuff, save up some money and hop on a flight and go by yourself. Or maybe go with a friend, whatever you want. But it's just great. It's a great time. If I got hired by the Tourism Board of Ireland, I would do that job for free. Okay, I would do it for free. I love Ireland. Anyway, that was my story. If you haven't seen either P.S. I Love You or Leap Year, very cute movies, romantic comedies. Watch them. You'll love them. And if you haven't been to Ireland, book that trip. Book that trip to Ireland, babe. Trust me. When I was there, I got nothing but love. Okay. I hope this was helpful or informational or at least funny and made your day. I love you very much. I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.